I start, allow me to introduce myself first. My name is Devi, and I'm the Executive Director of Strategy from Hakuhodo Network Indonesia. And I'm also the Director of Hakuhodo Institute of Life and Living ASEAN. As mentioned before, Hakuhodo is a creative agency, or you can call it advertising agency. But we are so keen on observing people's behavior. We are also kepo, just like the millennials. But the thing that we are kepo about is not just relationship status. We are kepo more towards the culture, society, and also the future. Now, today, we are going to share, of course, the topic is about millennials, and because we did the survey on ASEAN, so it suits the topic very well. Now, I know that Ms. Widow just now has already asked you to raise your hand for those who are millennials among here, but right now, I want to know more detail. How many of you were born in the 90s? Raise your hand. 90s? Quite a lot. Now, what about those of you who were born in the 80s? 80s. Also, I think we have more 80s audience here today. All right. What about 70s? The uncle and aunties of millennials. Okay, so now take a look closer at those who just raised their hand who were born in 90s and 80s. Do you think, they're all millennials. Millennials are born basically 80s and 90s. But do you think they have the same values, attitude, and lifestyle? If you already forgotten about those people who raised their hand, I'm going to introduce you these two young gentlemen, a very handsome gentleman. You can see here, one was born in 80s and the other 90s. Now take a good look at them, millennials. But do you think that they share the same kind of attitude, behavior, and also perhaps dreams and fear? Actually, this is the big questions that started our study. When we talk about millennials, all your marketing strategies and everything that you do targeting to this one segment. And usually, we use one approach to talk to these people. But looking at the huge age span, do you think you can only use one approach to talk to these kind of kids? Now, because of that, we ask ourselves, we are marketers, brand builders, media, publisher. Is our current strategy have targeting the right people with the right approach? To answer that questions, we did a very comprehensive study. We did 3 kind of studies. First one is about fixed point survey, where we talked to 8,000 people of millennials across ASEAN. And then we did our hypothesis, and then we go and check again to more than 1,000 people. And after getting the whole pictures, we spent a day with them at their houses. We observed their behavior, we hang out with them, and we really understand and want to know what kind of conversations that they're having with their friends, their families. And what's interesting is that apparently, and within the millennials itself, there's a huge gap. More than 70% of those who were born in 80s feel that they don't understand with the 90s kid. And the 90s kid also feel the same. So it's a mutual feeling. Both feel that there's a huge gap between them. And when we talk about gap in terms of mindset, we know that the way our brain processes information is based from all the past experiences that we have. So of course, because millennials live in a digital world, we also want to know what's the digital evolution that has been happening. So take a look at these pictures. At the top part, you can see is the age of the millennials. So during 90s, the 80s are 10 years old, the 90s are still toddlers, and 2010, the 80s are already 30s, and the 90s are starting their first jobber. Now let's see the computer evolutions. Desktop to a very personal mobile laptop. Mobility. How many of you still remember pager? You know, it is such embarrassing to call the operator and ask her to pass on a message. And you know young kids, right? We do all of these weird messages to our friends. Until now, super smartphones. Entertainment, cassette, VHS. Do you still remember watching Titanic on VHS at home with your family? Until now, it's all about streaming and also online subscriptions. And also communication, from handwritten letters, just like what Dylan did, until now, a very romantic and private channel, Tinder. How many of you have Tinder on your phone? So because of this kind of evolution, of course, it also affects their perceptions of reality. And it reminds me of a very interesting real story about a girl who just bought a second-hand car. So she bought a second-hand car from a man, and then after several days of using that car, she called the previous owner and complained. You know, your iPhone dock is broken. My iPhone, it breaks my iPhone. And then apparently, after they checked it, this is what happened. She's trying to force her iPhone into the cassette deck. Well, it's not her fault. When she was born, we are no longer listening to cassette. So this kind of things really gets us interesting and wanting to know more. So let's see how different, how big is the gap between millennials of those who were born in the 80s and in the 90s. Now let's meet the 80s millennial first. We know that we share everything on social media. But the biggest driver for those who were born in 80s are basically to storing memories. So it's like a digital album. And of course, you also know this, that whenever they post something, they have to curate it a lot. And even she said that whenever she posts on social media, she triple-checked how she looked. And she showed us the selfie album on her phone. It consists of hundreds of pictures of her. And she told us that it's already being selected out of the thousands of shots that she's taken. And to the 80s, it's very important to curate everything that they post because social media is a stage to represent their best self. This lady gave us a tip. She said that if you want to get likes on your Instagram post, Miss Wido, correct me if I'm wrong, but she told us her secret recipe, there are 3 things. First one is that you have to have a very good background, Instagrammable background. Second one is that you have to know your best angle. So apparently, this is her best angle, using sunglasses and a bikini. And the third thing is filter. So apparently, she uses so many apps, photo editing, to post only 1 pictures. So it only took her like 1 second to take the picture, but it can take up to 1 hour for her to edit and filter the photo before it's being posted on social media. Such a hard work to just post 1 picture. Okay, now let's moving on to how do they behave on shopping in terms of 80s and 90s. Apparently, the 80s, they still use omni-channel for shopping. So this man, he wanted to open a credit card account, and what he did is that he checked online, but also he visited the bank and talked to the customer service to know more about the products. And he chose the one that gave him this Body Shop gift. And the other man, when he wants to buy a smartphone, he also read lots of reviews on online, but he still has this need to go to the real store and then see the real phone and then have a conversations about, with the salesperson about all the features that this phone have before buying it. Because to the 80s, they want to maximize benefit and minimize risk. That's why they get to go offline and online to get that. So if we can conclude in terms of shopping behavior, because we are marketers, at the end of the day, we want to know how do they behave on purchasing some things. For the 80s, they are doing this dual channel purchasing style, where offline and online is as equal important to them. And because of that, we are talking about values, mindset, and lifestyle in this session. as the 80s, they have this specific mindset, which is they are a curator, because they curate everything. They select between what do I want to show in online, and it doesn't necessarily have to do the same thing of what's happening in my offline world. Also, they minimize risk. And they try to be very perfect in every post that they have. Now, this is the millennials' 80s. What about the 90s? Let's meet them. The attitude of I want to show my natural self definitely is much bigger on the 90s compared to the 80s. Because for them, sharing authentic, real-time moments is like a survival habit. Just like breathing and eating, even more so than eating. What's amusing to me is that this girl, she's one of our respondents, and in the middle of our interview, she is so busy with her phone. Being a non-millennial, to me, I think it's a bit rude. Can you just wait after the interview finished, then check your phone? But apparently, when we ask her, she is posting the interview during the interview. And she doesn't want to wait, because to her, it has to be now. Whatever that is happening offline has to also happen online. And remember the girl that has secret recipe to get more likes? To the 90s, it's not relevant, because to them, what's important is about being real. Embrace uniqueness. Even if they are weird, they think it's cool. They are the one who post their no makeup face or just wake up, things like all the weird faces that the 80s will be impossible to post. Not only about posting pictures, but this girl, her boyfriend forgot their anniversary, and instead of expressing her disappointment in a very private channel like WhatsApp or other messaging, no, she tweeted it. She tweeted it, disappointed. And to her, it doesn't matter if the world doesn't understand. She just want to be expressing her feelings wherever. And she doesn't also distinguish between what is a private line, what is a social line, what is public. And what about their online shopping behavior? Of course, the 90s, they do online shopping more. And they have so many apps that can help them to get the maximum benefit out of whatever that they're looking for. And what's interesting is that for the 90s, the whole shopping is an experience. So when they buy something online, there are a lot of highlight moments. One of the highlight moments that we all can relate to is when the package arrives at home, and you do the unboxing, and you can see whether what is coming is the same with what you order, right? But for this 90s, it doesn't stop there, because there's another highlight moment that make them very, very interested, is that when they can write reviews. So 90s are the one who write a very long reviews on every channels that you can read. For us, perhaps we can just, usually we just post like thumbs up or it's good. But no, for the 90s, they have to write so many paragraphs. Because they think it's in their blood that they have this responsibility to influence. That is why they like to share everything. And unlike the 80s, they are very much driven by impulsivity. That's why they don't need to go to the real store to buy anything. Just like this girl, she just bought a VR by just looking at YouTube. And why they can be that impulsive is because, unlike the 80s, the 90s sees there is no risk in any shopping experience. Because if they don't like the product, they can just sell it right away. So the whole shopping is like a traveling sometimes to them, because they have a lot of transformation and also a lot of information that they can share to the world. So to conclude, the purchasing behavior for 90s, unlike 80s, are more of a cyclical purchasing style, where the post-purchase is the focus for them. The moment that they write reviews is what enlightened them. So ladies and gentlemen, 90s, we can conclude them as a converginator because they converge everything. They don't see any blur, any line between offline and online. Whatever happening right now has to also happen in my Instagram. And also, there is no distinguish between what is personal and what is social. So everything is blurred, everything is converged. Hence, the converginator. So to conclude my presentation today, as I opened earlier with very big questions to each and every one of us in this room. When we are creating our marketing strategies and we want to target our audience, which is the millennials, is it only using one approach relevant to them? And the answer is not. One size does not fit all. There's a different motivations that drives the 80s that is totally different with the one that drives the 90s. So ladies and gentlemen, 80s are more towards curating things, and the 90s are more of a converginating things. And if you want to know more, we have our own website, which is open for public, that you can access, and you will get much more detailed information about the ASEAN Millennials. Thank you so much.